London, 1814. The Queen's Memorial Gardens at Windsor lay silent in the cool mist of dawn. Only the soft tread of a solitary figure disturbed the morning stillness. Catherine Calloway moved with practiced stealth between the manicured hedges, her plain woolen cloak pulled tight against the chill. She knelt before the ornate marble monument and, with reverent care, placed a small bouquet of white lilies and bluebells, the late Queen Charlotte's favourites. "For you, Your Majesty," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle rustling of leaves. "May you find peace in heaven that eluded you in life." Catherine rose quickly, brushing dew from her skirts. She had precisely 17 minutes to return to the servants' quarters before the household began to stir. As a lady's maid in the royal household, her absence would be noted and questioned, particularly if it became known she made these weekly pilgrimages to the late Queen's resting place. She hurried along the path, unaware of the tall figure watching from the shadow of a nearby oak. Lord Hugh Stanwix, cousin to the Prince Regent and reluctant courtier, had not intended to rise so early. An evening of excessive brandy and tedious company at Carlton House had left him with a pounding head and a desire for solitary contemplation. The gardens had seemed an ideal refuge, until he spotted the mysterious woman in her humble garb, moving with such purpose and grace toward the Queen's memorial. "Curious," he murmured, watching her retreat. "Most curious indeed. Catherine! Have you gone deaf, girl? Lady Pembroke's dress requires immediate attention." Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, stood in the doorway of the sewing room, her thin lips pressed into a disapproving line. "Forgive me, Mrs. Winters." Catherine set aside the chemise she had been mending. "I was lost in thought." A dangerous habit for a servant, the housekeeper sniffed. "Remember your station, girl. Lady Pembroke expects her new gown ready for tonight's ball at Carlton House, and I'll not have her complaining to the Prince again about the quality of our staff." "It will be ready," Catherine promised, reaching for the exquisite silk creation that awaited final stitching. "The beadwork is nearly complete." When Mrs. Winters departed, Catherine sighed. 3 years in service had taught her the art of invisibility, a skill she cultivated with care. To be noticed was dangerous. To be remembered, potentially ruinous. Her nimble fingers worked the delicate silver beads onto the bodice in an intricate pattern. The gown was a masterpiece, designed to catch every eye at the Prince Regent's ball. Lady Pembroke would shine like a star in the glittering firmament of the tun, while Catherine would remain in the shadows, as she always did. As she must. "Stanwix! What has you looking so thunderously bored? The night has barely begun." The Prince Regent, resplendent in his heavily embroidered coat and satin knee breeches, clasped Hugh's shoulder with affection. "Surely my little gathering offers some amusement." Hugh bowed, mindful of the eyes watching their exchange. "Your Royal Highness honors me with his concern. I find myself perhaps overly contemplative this evening." "Contemplation?" The prince snorted. "A waste of a handsome face and noble title. What you need, cousin, is a wife. Look around you. Half the eligible ladies of London await your attention." "And the other half await yours, sir," Hugh replied with a wry smile, causing the prince to burst into delighted laughter. "Well played. But seriously, Hugh, I worry for you. Since your return from the peninsula, you've become a veritable hermit. It's not natural for a man of 28. Hugh's expression darkened momentarily. "War changes a man's appetites, Your Highness." "Nonsense. War should make a man hunger for life's pleasures all the more." The prince's attention shifted to the doorway where new arrivals were being announced. "Ah! Lady Pembroke. A vision as always. Come, you must greet her with me." As they approached the striking brunette in her silver-beaded gown, Hugh found himself scanning the edges of the ballroom, searching for a face he knew he would not find, the face of a woman who visited a queen's grave in the quiet hours of dawn. Catherine slipped through the servants' entrance at Carlton House, balancing a hat-box containing Lady Pembroke's damaged headdress. The lady had sent an urgent message, her magnificent ostrich plume had been crushed by some clumsy gentleman, and she required immediate repairs. "This way," directed a footman. "You can use the small anteroom near the ladies' retiring room." Catherine nodded gratefully and followed him through the maze of corridors designed to keep servants invisible to the aristocratic guests. The anteroom was blessedly quiet, with a small table where she could work. She removed her tools and set about reshaping the crushed feathers with practiced precision. She worked quickly, humming softly to herself, when the door suddenly opened. Catherine glanced up, expecting Lady Pembroke, but instead found herself facing Lord Hugh Stanwick. "Forgive me," he said, appearing genuinely startled. "I was seeking a moment's respite from the crowd." Catherine immediately rose and curtsied. "My lord. Please, do not let me disturb you. I can find another place to work." "No, stay." His voice was soft but commanding. "I recognize you." Catherine's heart stopped. "My lord?" Hugh studied her face intently. "From the gardens. Windsor. You were placing flowers on Queen Charlotte's memorial." The color drained from Catherine's face. I believe you are mistaken, my lord." "I am not." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face. "Why would a lady's maid honor the late Queen with such devotion? And in such secrecy?" Catherine's hands trembled as she gathered her supplies. "With respect, my lord, servants have their reasons for keeping to themselves. Now, if you'll excuse me, Lady Pembroke awaits her repair." She moved to pass him, but he stepped into her path. "Wait." His voice had softened further. "I mean no harm. I merely find myself intrigued." Their eyes met, and Catherine felt a jolt of recognition. In his gaze was not accusation but genuine curiosity, and something else. Something that made her breath catch. The moment shattered as voices approached in the corridor. Catherine pulled back, breaking their connection. "Good evening, my lord," she whispered, slipping past him and fleeing the room, the repaired headdress clutched to her chest like a shield. "Stanwick! There you are." Lord Merrifield approached, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "You vanished so abruptly, I feared you'd abandoned the festivities entirely." Hugh accepted the proffered glass, his mind still on the lady's maid with the wary eyes. "Merely seeking fresher air, Thomas." "Ah, well, you've missed an excellent bit of gossip." Merrifield lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Lady Pembroke has been telling the most fascinating tale about a mysterious cousin of hers who vanished from society 3 years ago. Apparently, the girl was meant to make her debut, but disappeared the very night of her presentation. Some whisper she ran away with a lover, others that she suffered a nervous collapse. Either way, the family hushed it up completely." Hugh raised an eyebrow. "And why has Lady Pembroke chosen to resurrect this ancient scandal now?" "That's the interesting part," Merrifield continued. "The missing cousin was goddaughter to none other than Queen Charlotte herself. The Queen was reportedly devastated by her disappearance." Hugh's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. "Indeed? And does this mysterious cousin have a name?" "Catherine, I believe. Catherine Calloway. Daughter of the late Admiral Calloway." The glass nearly slipped from Hugh's fingers. Catherine awoke before dawn, as was her habit. Lady Pembroke had returned from the ball in high spirits, which had meant a late night of unlacing, hair brushing, and listening to detailed accounts of every dance, flirtation, and morsel of gossip. By the time Catherine had been dismissed, the household was deep in slumber. Now she moved quietly through her morning routine, washing with cold water from the basin and dressing in her simple grey work dress. Her mind kept returning to the encounter with Lord Stanwick. Had he truly recognized her from the gardens, or was it mere coincidence? Either way, she must be more careful. Discovery would mean ruin, not just for herself, but potentially for others. As she pinned her hair into its severe bun, a soft knock sounded at her door. "Miss Calloway." It was one of the footmen, his voice pitched low. "There's someone asking for you at the servants' entrance." Catherine frowned. "At this hour? Who is it?" "Wouldn't say, miss. Just that it's urgent." With a sense of foreboding, Catherine followed him down the narrow back stairs. In the small receiving area stood a figure she instantly recognized, Mrs. Lawson, who had been Queen Charlotte's personal maid for over 30 years. Mrs. Lawson? Catherine closed the door behind them. Is everything all right? The older woman's face was tense. You've been seen, Catherine. At the memorial. Questions are being asked. By whom? Catherine's voice was barely audible. Lord Stanwick has been making inquiries about you. Discreet ones, but inquiries nonetheless. Catherine sank onto a bench. What does he want? I don't know, child. But be careful. You've maintained your secret this long. Do not let curiosity undo all your sacrifice. Hugh stood in his study, examining the portrait that had arrived that morning. It had cost him a small fortune and several significant favors to obtain it from the Calloway family's sealed collection on such short notice. But as he studied the delicate features of the young woman captured in oils, he knew his efforts had been worthwhile. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same intelligent eyes, the same graceful neck, though the lady in the portrait wore her honeygold hair in fashionable ringlets rather than a severe servant's bun. She was dressed in the white gown of a debutante, with a simple strand of pearls adorning her throat. Catherine Calloway, Hugh murmured. What drove you from your rightful place in society? A knock interrupted his contemplation. Enter. His butler appeared. My lord, Lord Merrifield has arrived. Shall I show him in? Please. Thomas Merrifield strode into the room moments later, his expression curious. Hugh. What's this mysterious summons about? Your note said it was a matter of some delicacy. Hugh gestured to a chair. I need information, Thomas. About the Calloway family. The Calloways. Thomas settled himself comfortably. Not much to tell, that isn't common knowledge. Admiral Calloway was a naval hero, died at Trafalgar. Left a widow and daughter quite well provided for. The widow remarried rather quickly to, he paused, thinking, Lord Stafford, I believe. And the daughter? Catherine? Ah, yes, the mysterious vanishing debutante. Thomas's eyes lit with interest. Why this sudden fascination? Hugh evaded the question. What exactly happened to her? No one knows with certainty. She was presented at court, made quite an impression on the Queen, who had been her godmother. Then, the night before her first ball, she disappeared. No note, no explanation. The family claimed she'd been sent to relatives in the countryside for her health, but no one ever saw her again in society. And Lord Stafford? What manner of man is Catherine's stepfather? Thomas's expression grew more serious. Politically connected. Ambitious. Not particularly well-liked, but feared by many for his influence. Why do you ask? Hugh turned the portrait away from his friend's view. Mere curiosity. Now, shall we discuss something more entertaining? I believe you mentioned an invitation to Vauxhall Gardens this evening. Catherine, Lady Pembroke wishes to speak with you in her sitting room. Mrs. Winters delivered the message with a pointed look. She seems displeased. Catherine set aside her mending with a feeling of dread. Lady Pembroke was not known for patience with servants, and Catherine had worked diligently to avoid drawing her employer's attention. She knocked softly on the sitting-room door. Enter. Lady Pembroke sat at her writing desk, her back perfectly straight. Without looking up from her correspondence, she spoke. Close the door. Catherine obeyed, standing with folded hands and downcast eyes as proper for a servant awaiting instruction. I've received a curious inquiry, Lady Pembroke said, finally turning to face her. From Lord Stanwick. About you. Catherine's pulse quickened. My lady. He claims to be assembling a household staff for his country estate and inquired about your competence and character. Lady Pembroke's eyes narrowed. Highly irregular for a man of his position to involve himself in such matters. I cannot imagine why his lordship would inquire about me specifically, Catherine replied carefully. Can you not? Lady Pembroke rose, moving closer. I wonder, girl, if you're precisely what you claim to be. My lady. There's something familiar about you. Something I've only just begun to notice. She circled Catherine slowly. You speak too well for a servant. Your hands, though work roughened now, show the shape and grace of breeding. Catherine remained silent, her heart pounding. I once had a cousin, Lady Pembroke continued. A pretty, privileged thing who disappeared from society. The resemblance is striking. Many people share similar features, my lady. Lady Pembroke laughed coldly. Indeed they do. But not many share a unique scar. Her hand shot out, pushing back Catherine's sleeve to reveal a small crescent mark on her inner wrist, received when falling from a pony we were riding together at my father's estate when we were children. Catherine pulled her arm away, her composure finally cracking. Please, Isabel, so it is you. Lady Pembroke's voice was quiet now, triumphant. Catherine Calloway, hiding as a lady's maid in my very household. How delightfully scandalous. What do you intend to do? Catherine asked, her voice steady despite her fear. Lady Pembroke returned to her desk. That depends on what you can offer me in exchange for my silence. The Queen's Memorial Gardens were empty when Hugh arrived shortly before dawn. He positioned himself beside the large oak tree where he had first observed Catherine and waited, uncertain if she would appear after their encounter at Carlton House. The eastern sky had just begun to lighten when he detected movement along the path. Catherine approached, more cautious than before, pausing frequently to scan her surroundings. She carried her customary flowers, white lilies and bluebells. Hugh stepped from the shadows as she knelt before the monument. Miss Calloway. She whirled, nearly dropping her bouquet, her face pale with shock. Lord Stanwick. I think it's time we spoke honestly with one another, don't you? He kept his distance, trying to appear non-threatening despite his deliberate ambush. Catherine's chin lifted slightly. I have nothing to say to you, my lord. Then perhaps you'll permit me to speak instead. Hugh moved closer, noting how she tensed but did not retreat. I know who you are. Catherine Calloway, goddaughter to Queen Charlotte, daughter of Admiral Calloway, an heiress to a considerable fortune. A young woman who vanished from society 3 years ago and has been living as a servant ever since. If you've come to expose me, I've come to understand, he interrupted gently. Why would a woman of your birth and prospects choose such a life? What drives you to honor the Queen's memory with such devotion when doing so risks your carefully constructed disguise? Catherine looked away, her fingers tightening around the flowers. My reasons are my own, Lord Stanwick. Indeed they are. But perhaps sharing them might ease your burden. When she remained silent, he added, I give you my word as a gentleman that nothing you tell me will be repeated without your permission. The word of a gentleman, she echoed with unexpected bitterness. I've learned the hard way how little that can sometimes mean. Hugh studied her face, seeing the shadow of old pain. Someone betrayed your trust. My stepfather, Lord Stafford. The admission seemed to surprise even Catherine herself. After my father died, my mother remarried quickly. Too quickly. I was 14, grieving, and suddenly subject to the authority of a man I neither knew nor trusted. What did he do to you? Catherine knelt to place her flowers at the base of the memorial, buying time to compose herself. It wasn't what he did, it was what he planned. My father left his fortune in trust for me, to be managed by my mother and her husband until I married. Lord Stafford was careful, patient. He cultivated the image of a caring stepfather while systematically isolating my mother and controlling every aspect of our lives. Hugh waited as she traced the carved letters of the Queen's name with gentle fingers. When I came of age, he arranged my presentation at court, my debut into society. Everything appeared perfect. She rose, facing Hugh with newfound resolve. But I discovered he had already selected my future husband, an elderly duke with gambling debts that Stafford had purchased. The marriage contract was drawn up before I'd even been presented to society. I was to be sold to pay my stepfather's political debts and fund his ambitions. And the Queen? Catherine's expression softened. She knew my father well, had a genuine affection for him. When she noticed my distress during my presentation, she spoke to me privately. I confessed everything. She promised to help me, to speak to the Prince Regent about my situation. But she never had the chance, Hugh guessed. She fell ill very suddenly. Some said it was merely her chronic condition worsening, but... Catherine hesitated. You suspected otherwise? She nodded. The timing was too convenient. 2 days after our conversation, she took to her bed. My stepfather accelerated plans for my marriage. The night before I was to meet the Duke formally, I fled with the help of Queen Charlotte's most trusted lady's maid, Mrs. Lawson. And you've been hiding in plain sight ever since. Hugh took a step closer. But why remain in London? Why not go abroad, where discovery would be less likely? I needed to know the truth about the Queen's death, Catherine replied. And I could not abandon my mother entirely. Through Mrs. Lawson, I've been able to maintain some knowledge of her welfare. Has your investigation yielded anything? Catherine's shoulders slumped slightly. Nothing definitive. But I've gathered evidence of Lord Stafford's other misdeeds, financial improprieties, political extortion. I've documented everything, hoping someday to expose him without exposing myself. A dangerous game, Hugh observed. No more dangerous than the alternative. She squared her shoulders. Now you know my secret, Lord Stanwick. What do you intend to do with it? Help you, he said simply. Catherine's eyes widened in surprise. Why would you involve yourself in my troubles? Because injustice offends me, Hugh replied. And because I believe your story. During the war, I saw how power corrupts, and how the vulnerable suffer when good people remain silent. A hint of suspicion lingered in her gaze. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership, he said. Together, we might accomplish what neither of us could alone. You cannot seriously intend to trust him, Mrs. Lawson hissed, her eyes wide with alarm. They sat in the small parlour of her modest lodgings near Windsor, where Catherine had sought her counsel immediately after her conversation with Hugh. I have little choice, Catherine replied. Lady Pembroke has recognised me as well. She's demanding information about Stafford in exchange for her silence. Information? What sort of information? Political secrets. Knowledge of his business dealings. Anything that might give her husband advantage over him in Parliament. Catherine twisted her handkerchief anxiously. She's given me 3 days to provide something of value. Mrs. Lawson sank into a chair. This is precisely what we've feared for 3 years. Discovery. Lord Stanwick has resources I lack. Connections I cannot access. Catherine leaned forward earnestly. And there was something in his manner. I believe he is sincere in his offer of help. Men like Lord Stanwick do not involve themselves in the troubles of women like us without expecting something in return, Mrs. Lawson warned. Catherine flushed. He is not like that. You've spoken to the man twice. Sometimes one knows, Catherine insisted. Just as I knew to trust you when you helped me escape. Mrs. Lawson's expression softened. Your instincts were sound then, it's true. But the stakes are higher now. She hesitated, then reached into her pocket. Perhaps it's time to give you this. She withdrew a small key, offering it to Catherine. The Queen entrusted this to me before she died. She said if anything happened to her, I was to ensure it reached you when you most needed protection. Catherine accepted the key with trembling fingers. What does it open? A strongbox in the Queen's private apartments at Windsor. It contains evidence. Of what, I do not know. Her Majesty said only that it would provide you leverage against those who might wish you harm. Catherine closed her fingers around the small metal object. After 3 years, why give this to me now? Because you're considering placing your trust in a powerful man. Before you do, you should arm yourself with whatever protection the Queen intended for you. Mrs. Lawson's gaze was steady. Visit the apartment tomorrow. I'll arrange access through my connections with the household staff. Hugh paced the perimeter of his study, frustration evident in every line of his body. Nothing? Are you certain? His solicitor, Mr. Parker, adjusted his spectacles nervously. We've examined Lord Stafford's business dealings most thoroughly, my lord. While there are certainly indications of sharp practice, there is nothing definitively illegal. He is cautious, methodical, and appears to maintain multiple sets of records for his various enterprises. There must be something, Hugh insisted. No man acquires power as quickly as Stafford without leaving traces. If I may suggest, my lord, Mr. Parker ventured, perhaps we are looking in the wrong direction. Rather than focusing on his business affairs, we might investigate his more personal matters. Hugh paused. What do you mean? Lady Stafford's first husband, Admiral Calloway, died under somewhat unusual circumstances. The official record states he succumbed to wounds received at Trafalgar, but he survived the initial battle by several months. There were whispers, quickly silenced, about the nature of his eventual decline. You think Stafford may have had a hand in his death? Mr. Parker coughed delicately. I merely suggest it might be an avenue worth exploring, particularly given what Miss Calloway has shared about her stepfather's character. Hugh considered this new direction. Find me the physician who attended Admiral Calloway in his final days. And any servants who were in the household at that time. That may prove difficult after so many years. Try, Hugh commanded. And send a message to Windsor immediately. I need to speak with Miss Calloway as soon as possible. Catherine slipped through the little-used servants' corridor in the east wing of Windsor Castle, heart pounding with each creaking floorboard. Mrs. Lawson's directions had been precise. The Queen's private sitting room remained largely undisturbed since her death, preserved out of respect but rarely visited. The corridor opened into a small antechamber. Catherine used the key to unlock the ornate door beyond, stepping into a room that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light penetrating the heavy curtains. Following Mrs. Lawson's instructions, Catherine moved to the fireplace, feeling along the elaborate wooden mantelpiece for a hidden lever. A small panel clicked open, revealing a cavity containing a metal strongbox. With shaking hands, she inserted the key. The lock turned with surprising ease, as if it had been recently oiled and maintained. Inside lay a leather portfolio tied with ribbon, several folded documents bearing official seals, and a letter addressed simply, Catherine. She recognized the Queen's distinctive handwriting immediately. Breaking the seal, she began to read, my dearest goddaughter, if you are reading this, then my fears have proven justified, and I have been unable to protect you as I promised. Forgive me this failure. I pray that Mrs. Lawson has managed to help you escape the fate arranged for you by your stepfather. Enclosed you will find evidence of Lord Stafford's treachery, not merely against you, but against the Crown itself. For years, he has been selling naval secrets to the French, information obtained first through your father's position and later through his own political connections. Your father discovered this betrayal shortly before Trafalgar. I believe it is why he died, not from his wounds, but from poison administered slowly over months by someone in your household who was in Stafford's employ. I began gathering evidence when you confided in me about your impending marriage. I intended to present it to the Prince Regent the very day I fell ill. My sudden sickness was no coincidence. Catherine. Use these documents wisely. They will protect you, but they will also place you in grave danger. Trust no one fully, not even those closest to the Crown. With deepest affection and regret. Charlotte. Catherine stared at the letter in horror, then quickly examined the other documents. Naval dispatches with evidence of tampering. Financial records showing payments from French sources. A signed statement from her father's valet describing suspicious behavior in the Admiral's final weeks. The evidence was damning and utterly dangerous. A noise in the corridor outside froze her in place. Footsteps approached, then paused outside the door. Catherine hastily gathered the documents, securing them inside her dress, and closed the strongbox. She had just replaced it in its hiding place when the door opened. "I thought I might find you here," said Lord Stanwick, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "Though I admit, I expected to have to wait longer." "How did you know?" Catherine demanded, backing away. "I received a message that you would be here," he replied. "From Mrs. Lawson." Catherine's eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Mrs. Lawson would never. She would if she believed you were in danger." Hugh moved closer. "Lady Pembroke's husband is Lord Stafford's closest ally in Parliament. Whatever you tell her will go directly to your stepfather." "How do you know that?" "Because I've spent the last 2 days investigating everyone connected to this situation." His expression grew grave. "Including the circumstances of your father's death." Catherine pressed a hand to her bodice, feeling the crinkle of the documents hidden there. "And what have you discovered, Lord Stanwick?" "That Admiral Calloway likely died by poison, not from his wounds. That your stepfather has connections to French intelligence. And that anyone aware of these facts would be in considerable danger." His eyes searched her face. "What did you find in the Queen's strongbox, Catherine?" She hesitated, uncertain whether to trust him with the explosive information she now possessed. "How do I know you aren't working for Stafford yourself? This could all be an elaborate trap." Hugh's expression softened. "You don't know. You can only judge by your instincts and my actions." He extended his hand. "Come with me now. My carriage is waiting. We need to leave Windsor immediately. It's no longer safe for you here." "Where would we go?" "To someone who can help us use whatever information you've found. Someone with the power to protect you from Stafford and his allies." "Who?" "The Prince Regent himself." The carriage rattled at dangerous speed along the road to London, Hugh and Catherine seated facing each other in tense silence. She had shown him the Queen's letter but kept the supporting document secured within her dress. "The Prince Regent may not believe us," Catherine said finally. "Lord Stafford has cultivated his favour for years. Prinny values 2 things above all else, his own security and his mother's memory," Hugh replied. "Evidence that Stafford betrayed both will outweigh any personal affection. And if we're wrong, then we'll have delivered ourselves directly into your stepfather's sphere of influence." Hugh's expression was grim. "I won't pretend the risk isn't considerable." Catherine studied his face in the shifting light of the carriage. "Why are you doing this, Lord Stanwick?" "Truly? You hardly know me." Hugh was silent for a long moment. "In Spain, during the war, I witnessed a young woman murdered for possessing information that threatened a powerful colonel. I could have saved her, had I acted sooner on my suspicions about the man. I did not, and she died. I swore then that I would never again stand idle in the face of such injustice. So this is about assuaging your guilt." His eyes met hers directly. "It began that way, perhaps. But no longer." The intensity of his gaze made Catherine look away. "What has changed?" "I've come to admire your courage. Few would have sacrificed everything as you did, position, comfort, identity, to escape a dishonorable fate. Fewer still would have continued seeking justice at such personal risk." Catherine felt warmth spreading through her chest at his words. "Most would call it foolishness rather than courage. Most have never faced the choice between dignity and security." His hand moved across the carriage to cover hers briefly. "I hope when this is resolved, you might consider another path forward." "What path?" The carriage lurched suddenly, cutting off his answer as they both braced against the violent motion. The vehicle slowed, then stopped. "What's happening?" Catherine whispered. Hugh reached beneath the seat, withdrawing a pistol. "Stay here." He opened the door cautiously, peering out. Catherine heard voices, their driver arguing with someone. Then a shout, followed by the unmistakable sound of a scuffle. Hugh turned back to her, his expression urgent. "We're being intercepted. Come quickly." He helped her from the carriage. In the fading light, Catherine could see 2 mounted men wrestling with their driver while a third approached the carriage. "This way," Hugh murmured, guiding her toward a copse of trees beside the road. We need to. A shot cracked through the air. Hugh stumbled, his hand going to his shoulder. Hugh! Catherine cried, supporting him as he regained his balance. Keep moving, he growled, raising his pistol toward their pursuers. Head for the trees. They ran, Hugh firing once to slow their attackers. The bullet found its mark, sending one man tumbling from his horse with a cry of pain. The delay was enough for them to reach the shelter of the trees. We can't outrun them, Hugh said, his breathing labored, blood seeping between the fingers pressed to his shoulder. Not with my injury. You need to go on alone. I won't leave you, Catherine insisted. You must. The documents are what matter. He pressed his pistol into her hand. Do you know how to use this? She nodded, remembering lessons from her naval father years before. But I still won't leave you. A crashing sound in the underbrush announced their pursuer's approach. Hugh pulled Catherine close, his lips brushing her ear. Then we stand together. The Prince Regent's private study at Carlton House was lavishly appointed but surprisingly intimate. Catherine stood beside Hugh, acutely aware of her bedraggled appearance, her maid's dress torn and muddied, her hair falling in disarray around her shoulders. Hugh looked little better, his coat hastily arranged to conceal the bandage visible beneath his blood-stained shirt. Their escape had been narrow indeed. Only the timely arrival of a patrol of Bow Street runners, summoned by a message Hugh had prudently sent ahead in case of trouble, had saved them from Stafford's men. Now they faced the Prince Regent himself, who lounged in an ornate chair examining the documents with an expression that shifted between disbelief and cold anger. These accusations are most grave, the prince said finally. Treason is not a charge I can entertain lightly, even against a man I have come to distrust. The evidence speaks for itself, Your Royal Highness, Hugh replied. And Miss Calloway's testimony is the word of a young woman who has been living under false pretenses for 3 years, the prince interrupted. No matter how justified her deception might have been. Catherine stepped forward. Your Highness, I understand your hesitation. But I ask you to consider why the Queen, your mother, would have preserved these documents and entrusted them to someone she knew to be loyal to the crown. The prince's expression softened slightly at the mention of his mother. He studied Catherine more carefully. You were her goddaughter. She spoke of you often, even after your disappearance. She tried to protect me, Catherine said quietly. And I believe her illness was no coincidence. The prince's face darkened. That is the most serious allegation of all. And the most difficult to prove, Hugh acknowledged. But the pattern is clear. Admiral Calloway discovers Stafford's treachery and dies mysteriously. Miss Calloway is to be married off to remove her from the household. The Queen begins investigating and falls suddenly ill. The prince rose, pacing the room with agitation. I never trusted Stafford. Too smooth by half. Too convenient in his political positions. He stopped, facing them. Yet he has powerful allies. Moving against him without absolute certainty would be dangerous. More dangerous than allowing a traitor to continue operating at the highest levels of government. Hugh challenged. The prince's eyes narrowed at Hugh's boldness, then unexpectedly, he laughed. Your father was just as direct, Stanwick. It was his best quality. He turned to Catherine. And you have your father's courage, Miss Calloway. He rang a small bell, summoning a secretary. Arrange for Lord Stafford to attend me tomorrow at noon. A private audience. And send word to the Home Secretary to join us an hour before. The secretary bowed and departed. The prince turned back to them. I will confront him with this evidence myself. Your Highness, Catherine said anxiously, he will know immediately that I am the source. Precisely, the prince replied. Which is why you, Miss Calloway, will be placed under my personal protection until this matter is resolved. He gestured to Hugh. And you, cousin, will see to her safety. Your townhouse should suffice, with appropriate chaperonage, of course. Hugh bowed. Of course, Your Highness. Good. The prince moved toward the door. I suggest you both get some rest. Tomorrow promises to be eventful. Catherine stood at the window of Hugh's elegant townhouse, watching dawn break over London. She had barely slept, despite the comfort of the guest chamber and the reassuring presence of Mrs. Lawson, who had been summoned to serve as her chaperone. The door opened quietly behind her. Hugh entered, already dressed for the day, his injured arm supported in a discreet sling beneath his coat. "You're awake early," he observed. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too many thoughts." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "Second thoughts about confronting Stafford?" "No," she said firmly. "Only concern about what comes after. I've lived as Catherine the lady's maid for so long, I'm not certain I remember how to be Catherine Calloway." "You've been her all along," Hugh said gently. "The courage, the determination, the loyalty that drove you to honor the Queen's memory even at risk to yourself, those belong to Catherine Calloway, not her disguise." She turned to face him, struck by the warmth in his eyes. "And what of you, Lord Stanwick? Once this is resolved, will you return to your solitary contemplation?" "Hugh," he corrected softly. "And no, I think not. Recent events have reminded me that there are things worth engaging with the world for." His uninjured hand moved to touch her cheek lightly. "People worth knowing." Catherine felt heat rise to her face. "Even troublesome young women who drag you into dangerous conspiracies." "Especially those," he murmured, his expression growing serious. "Catherine, when this is finished, I hope you might consider," a sharp knock interrupted them. Mrs. Lawson entered, her expression grave. "A messenger from Carlton House, my lord. The Prince Regent requests your immediate presence. Both of you." The atmosphere at Carlton House was tense, guards posted more prominently than usual. Catherine and Hugh were led not to the Prince's study but to a larger state-room where they found the Prince in conversation with several stern-looking gentlemen. "Ah, Stanwick, Miss Calloway." The Prince beckoned them forward. "You arrive at a most opportune moment. Lord Stafford has just been taken into custody." Catherine gasped. "Already? I thought the confrontation wasn't until noon." "Events accelerated unexpectedly," the Prince replied. "It seems our friend Stafford attempted to flee London this morning. Most incriminating behavior for an innocent man, wouldn't you agree?" One of the gentlemen stepped forward, an older man with shrewd eyes whom Catherine recognized as the Home Secretary. "His papers are being examined as we speak. Preliminary findings suggest the evidence you provided barely scratches the surface of his treachery." "And my mother?" Catherine asked anxiously. "Lady Stafford is under the protection of the Crown," the Prince assured her. "Though I regret to inform you she appears to have been kept in ignorance through liberal doses of laudanum. Her physician has been replaced, and we expect her health to improve rapidly." Catherine felt her knees weaken with relief. Hugh's hand moved to support her elbow. "There is one other matter," the Prince continued. "Concerning Lady Pembroke." Catherine tensed. "Yes, Your Highness. She has been attempting to gain audience with me since dawn, claiming to have information vital to national security." The Prince's eyes twinkled with unexpected mischief. "I suspect she hopes to position herself favorably before her husband's association with Stafford becomes widely known." "What will happen to her?" Catherine asked. "That depends largely on what she actually knows," the Home Secretary interjected. "And on what you would recommend, Miss Calloway, given her recent attempts to extort you." Catherine considered this unexpected power over her former employer. "She was unkind but not cruel. I believe she acted from ambition rather than malice. Perhaps a quiet removal from London society would be punishment enough." The Prince nodded approvingly. "Compassionate as well as brave. Your father would be proud." He turned to Hugh. "And you, cousin? Your involvement in this affair has not gone unnoticed. There will be questions about your relationship with Miss Calloway." Hugh straightened, his expression resolute. "I hope to make that relationship permanent, with Miss Calloway's permission and Your Highness's blessing." Catherine turned to him in surprise. "Hugh?" He took her hand, heedless of their audience. I intended a more private declaration, but circumstances seem determined to deny us privacy. Catherine Calloway, these past days have shown me a woman of extraordinary courage and principle, qualities I have spent years searching for. Would you do me the honor of considering marriage?" The prince cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should give them a moment," he suggested, gesturing for the others to follow him from the room. When they were alone, Catherine searched Hugh's face. "You cannot be serious. We've known each other barely a week." "I've known all I need to know since I watched you place flowers on the Queen's grave," he replied. "Your loyalty, your courage, your determination, these are rare qualities, Catherine. Qualities I've sought in vain since returning from war. But your position, your family, will be delighted that I've finally shown interest in something beyond brooding in my study." He smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. "I don't ask for an immediate answer. Only that you consider the possibility of a future together." Catherine felt tears threatening. After 3 years of hiding, of constant vigilance, the prospect of safety, of happiness, seemed almost too much to comprehend. "I will consider it. Most seriously." His smile broadened. "That is all I ask. For now." 1 month later, the Queen's Memorial Gardens at Windsor bloomed in summer splendor, the morning mist giving way to golden sunshine. Catherine approached the marble monument, no longer in a servant's dress but attired in a simple but elegant walking gown of periwinkle blue. In her arms, she carried her customary offering of lilies and bluebells. She knelt, arranging the flowers with care. "The last time I'll bring these as Catherine Calloway," she murmured to the stone. "Though not the last time I'll come to honor you." "I should hope not," said a familiar voice behind her. "It would be a poor beginning to our marriage if you abandoned such a meaningful tradition." Catherine rose, turning to find Hugh watching her with affection. "I didn't hear you approach." "I've learned from the best," he teased, coming to stand beside her. "Your stealth while a lady's maid was most impressive." She smiled, taking his offered arm. His wound had healed well, leaving only a slight stiffness that the physicians assured would fade with time. "Is everything prepared for tomorrow?" "Indeed. A small ceremony at St. George's Chapel, as you requested. The prince will attend, along with your mother, who seems to improve daily." He guided her along the garden path. "And Mrs. Lawson has agreed to remain in your household as your personal companion. And you're truly content with such a modest beginning to our marriage? No grand ball? No elaborate celebration?" Hugh stopped, turning to face her. "Catherine, I would marry you in a stable if necessary. After what we've endured together, such details seem trivial." She laughed, a sound that still surprised her with its freedom. "A stable might be excessive economy, even for me." "Then St. George's Chapel shall have to suffice." He bent to kiss her lightly. "Though I insist on one extravagance." "And what might that be, Lord Stanwick?" His eyes sparkled with mischief. "On our journey to my country estate after the ceremony, I've arranged for us to visit every garden of note between Windsor and Derbyshire." Catherine's heart swelled with affection. "To gather flowers?" "Precisely." His expression grew tender. "No matter where life takes us, Catherine, I promise you will never lack for blooms to honor those you love." As they continued their walk through the gardens, Catherine reflected on the extraordinary path that had led her from desperate flight to unexpected happiness. The lady's maid who left flowers on the Queen's grave had found not only justice but love, a fitting tribute to the godmother who had tried to protect her. Tomorrow she would become Lady Stanwick. But she would always remember the quiet courage that had sustained her during those years of hiding, and the man who had seen her true self even when disguised. The flowers had led him to her. And now they would mark the beginning of their life together.